In the quiet, picturesque town of Kottayam in Kerala, India, something deeply disturbing happened in 1992, a tragedy that would take 28 long years to uncover. It was a case that no one saw coming, a case that would eventually shake the very foundations of a community, challenge the police, and raise questions about corruption and justice. The story of Sister Abhaya's tragic death is one that started with confusion and disbelief, but eventually unraveled to reveal a dark, twisted tale of secrets, manipulation, and hidden truths. The case began on the morning of March 27, 1992. The residents of St. Pius Thick Convent were shocked when they realized that 21-year-old Sister Abhaya was missing. She had been studying late the night before, preparing for her exams the next day. It wasn't unusual for her to wake up early to study in the quiet hours of the morning. On that fateful day, she set her alarm for 4 a.m., hoping to catch up on a few more pages of her notes before the day began. Little did anyone know, this would be the last time anyone would see her alive. When the other nuns at the convent woke up that morning, they quickly noticed that Sister Abhaya's room was empty. Her study materials were left scattered around, and her slippers lay by the side of the door. At first, the other nuns assumed she had gone to pray, or had gone for an early morning walk, which wasn't unusual. But when they searched the convent, they found no sign of her. Panic began to set in, and the atmosphere in the convent grew tense. Where had she gone? Why was she missing? Soon, they found something that only deepened the mystery. A water bottle, left open, and water spilled across the kitchen floor. A single slipper was found near the convent's well, but still, there was no sign of Sister Abhaya. The situation took a darker turn when one of the nuns approached the well and looked down. What she saw made her blood run cold. Sister Abhaya's lifeless body was floating in the water. Her body was quickly pulled from the well, and the nuns were left in a state of complete shock. How could this have happened? Just the night before, they had shared a meal with her, laughed, and talked about their futures. And now, she was dead. The local police were called to the scene, and as part of the usual procedure, they began an investigation. V.V. Augustin, the local police officer, arrived to examine the scene and quickly wrote up a report. A photographer was called to document the body, and Sister Abhaya was sent for an autopsy. The results of the autopsy were shocking. While the official cause of death was listed as drowning, the doctors noted that there was a head injury on the body. This raised more questions than answers. Could this have been a murder, or was it truly a suicide, as the initial assumption seemed to suggest? The police were quick to declare it a suicide, but many people found this conclusion difficult to accept. Why would Sister Abhaya, a young woman full of life and ambition, take her own life in such a violent manner? She had no history of depression, no signs of emotional distress. She was dedicated to her religious studies and had a promising future ahead of her. And yet, the local police were quick to close the case, claiming that it was a suicide. This decision left many members of the community feeling uneasy. There were too many inconsistencies, too many unanswered questions. How could the police be so certain? The situation became even more complicated when it was revealed that some of the evidence in the case seemed to have been mishandled or overlooked. The fridge door in the convent was found open, and a bottle of water had been left spilled across the floor. Sister Abhaya's slippers were found out of place, as though she had been in a hurry. These details didn't seem to fit with the idea of a woman quietly ending her life. It didn't make sense. Many people in the town began to suspect that there was more to the story than the police were willing to admit, and they weren't wrong. As the case continued, there were calls for a more thorough investigation. One of the most vocal critics of the police's handling of the case was activist Joan Puen Periclet, who formed a committee to demand justice for Sister Abhaya. The pressure on the police grew, and the case was eventually transferred to the crime branch. But even with the fresh eyes of the crime branch, the investigation seemed to stall. Despite months of work, the crime branch concluded that Sister Abhaya's death was, in fact, a suicide. The news was devastating. Not only had the family and friends of Sister Abhaya been denied closure, but the crime branch's report seemed to reinforce the idea that the case was nothing more than a tragic, if not suspicious, suicide. And so, for years, the case remained unresolved. Sister Abhaya's death was just another unsolved mystery in the eyes of the public. But that wasn't the end. In 1994, things took a surprising turn. A CBI officer named Vargas P. Thomas held a press conference and revealed that he had been under pressure to declare the case a suicide. His shocking admission rocked the investigation to its core. How had the police been pressured to close the case so quickly? Who had been behind the push to make this case go away? With the officer's confession, the public began to suspect that there was something much darker at play. Could it be that someone powerful was trying to cover up the truth? The case quickly became the center of a media storm. The CBI continued its investigation, but without any solid leads, it seemed like they were fighting a losing battle. In 1996, after years of digging into the case, the CBI released a new report. The evidence seemed to suggest that Sister Abhaya's death was indeed a murder. The report stated that the original investigation had missed key evidence, and the injuries on her body were inconsistent with a suicide. The CBI concluded that Sister Abhaya's death was a homicide, but despite this, they still had no suspects. The mystery remained unsolved. By 1999, the case had become one of the longest-running mysteries in India. Despite years of investigation, there were no clear answers. The police, the crime branch, and the CBI had all failed to find any concrete evidence to solve the case. Some people began to wonder if the truth would ever come out. But then, in 2007, something extraordinary happened. A witness came forward with information that would completely change the course of the investigation. A man named Akar Raju, a petty thief who had committed crimes around the convent in 1992, claimed that he had seen something strange the night of Sister Abhaya's death. He said that he had been on the convent's grounds, planning to steal copper rods and wires, when he saw something he could never forget. He claimed to have seen Father Thomas Couture, Father Jose Purikayal, and Sister Sifi on the night of the murder. Raju was a man who had a criminal past. He was no angel, but his testimony would turn out to be crucial. He admitted that he had been stealing from the convent in 1992, but claimed that what he saw that night was more important than any of his previous crimes. He said he saw the three individuals acting suspiciously, sneaking around the convent at odd hours. It was this new information that sparked a fresh round of investigation. Could Raju's statement be the key to solving the case? At first, no one knew whether to believe him. A petty thief? Could he really be trusted to tell the truth? But Raju's testimony seemed to match some of the things that had been happening in the case. It was then that the investigation took a new direction. Could Father Thomas, Father Jose, and Sister Safi have been involved in Sister Abhaya's death? In 2008, after years of dead ends and frustration, the CBI decided to conduct a narco-analysis test on the three suspects. This controversial procedure, which used drugs to induce a state of truthfulness, would be the final test of their innocence or guilt. The results were shocking. During their tests, all three suspects, Father Thomas, Father Jose, and Sister Sifi, appeared to confess their involvement in Sister Abhaya's murder. However, the situation became even more twisted when it was revealed that the tapes of the narco test had been tampered with. Someone had altered the recordings in an attempt to cover up the truth. This discovery sent shockwaves through the investigation. Who was responsible for the tampering, and why? The truth seemed to be slipping further and further away. The case dragged on for years, but in 2020, after 28 long years of delays, cover-ups, and false leads, justice finally came. The Kerala High Court ruled that Father Thomas, Father Jose, and Sister Sifi were guilty of murder. The evidence, including the narco test results and Raju's testimony, were enough to convict them. The court sentenced Father Thomas and Sister Sifi to life in prison for the murder of Sister Abhaya, and the case that had once seemed unsolvable was finally brought to an end. The mystery of Sister Abhaya's death is a chilling reminder of how deep corruption can run, how easily the truth can be buried, and how long it can take for justice to prevail. But in the end, the truth was revealed. Despite all the obstacles, the murder of Sister Abhaya was finally solved. and her family and friends could finally begin to heal. And it was thanks to the persistence of one witness, a petty thief, that the mystery was unraveled. It's a story that shows us that sometimes even the most unexpected people can hold the key to uncovering the truth.